Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a great show for you. We're going to start off with an article about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she says, let them eat bread, or we'll shoot you if we don't get the bread we want. And I'll explain in just a moment. And then a guy who I've become a big fan of, who I actually think may end up being president one day, Senator Hawley from Missouri. He's been in a kind of Twitter war, if you will, with the NBA and ESPN, and he is fighting and firing back at them. And it has everything to do with the cancel and woke culture, and we'll explain that. And then I got a question for you. Can Black Lives Matter vandalism be vandalized? And it's kind of a question because there's a lot of vandalism around Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and now there's a question of whether or not the Black Lives Matter vandalism can be vandalized itself, and I'll explain. But we start with AOC, all things AOC, right? Alexandria, this is a Fox News article. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doubles down amid GOP criticism over her take on New York City crime wave, the shootings, the violence that is happening in New York. Now, we're going to play this video. We're going to start it. It's about a 4 or 5 minute video. Well, I want to start it around the 2 minute mark, if that's possible. And it is Ocasio-Cortez and some comments she made the other day at a virtual town hall meeting where she basically explained, at least from her perspective, why we're seeing an increase in shooting and shooting deaths in New York City. Can we play that?
So why is this uptick in crime happening? Well, let's think about it. Do we think this has to do with the fact that there's record unemployment in the United States right now? The fact that people are at a level of economic desperation that we have not seen since the Great Recession? Maybe this has to do with the fact that people aren't paying their rent and are scared to pay their rent. And so they go out and they need to feed their child and they don't have money. So you maybe they're put in a position where they feel like they either need to shoplift some bread or go hungry that night. Maybe it's the fact that unemployment provisions have not been given to everyone. Maybe it's because
all right, let's stop it right there. So there's so much in there that's controversial, but she essentially is explaining the violence that is happening in New York City, specifically the gun violence, because that's what she was asked about. And she said maybe people are afraid to pay their rent. Maybe they can't pay their rent, and they're having to make a decision about whether to feed their child by stealing a loaf of bread. You know, that is a very interesting take on it. But she doubled down on that. She was criticized primarily by Republicans about saying that. You know, Joe Biden didn't criticize her, for instance, about saying that. I guess he's thinking that that people are it's, you know, justification. It's a justified shoot because you're after some bread. So let's talk a little bit about that. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defended those very comments we just played she made over the weekend, suggesting that the crime surge in New York City is likely because struggling residents are forced to shoplift in order to feed their children and she said she defended it by saying Republicans who are criticizing her haven't experienced or seen poverty. So, you know, I guess the poverty sucks crowd, that Republicans are the golf club crowd, you know, the pinkies up and, oh, I say, do you have some Grey Poupon? I mean, I guess that's what her picture of Republicans. But wait a minute. See, you can't have your cake or bread, for instance, and eat it too, Alexandria, because aren't Republicans supposed to be the great unwashed? Aren't we that support Donald Trump supposed to be like poorly educated? I mean, really? Aren't we supposed to be clingers? Clinging to our Bibles and our guns, and those people? I mean, so how can we both be poorly educated and not know poverty? Because if you're poorly educated, poverty tends to go along with that. So this idea that you can be both poorly educated and never experience poverty. Only in Progresso world is that possible. And that's what we're heading for, by the way, Progresso world. I was saying Bizarro world, but it's past that. We are, especially if we elect Joe Biden, we are and elevate Ocasio-Cortez. We're going to be living in Progresso world where, gun violence is explained by you just need a loaf of bread. I mean, for God's sakes, before you shoot me, talk to me a little bit. I'll get you a loaf of bread if that's what you need. Republicans, she said, are all upset that I'm connecting the dots between poverty and crime. The Progressive Firebrand tweeted. So they're labeling her the Progressive Firebrand. I would label, as someone who, voted Republican, I actually have myself one of them old college degrees, but according to her, I'm probably poorly educated. Well, if I'm poorly educated, then she is an overly educated idiot. I'm just saying. But she went on to say, I know most of them haven't experienced or seen these issues firsthand, but I have. I wonder where she saw them, because she has an interesting background. She said, this may be hard for them to admit, but poverty and crime are highly linked, both violent and nonviolent alike. I actually think Ocasio-Cortez, Miss Cortez, that Republicans have actually been pointing that out, that areas of high poverty tend to be areas of high crime. And thus the inverse, if even by your own count here, is true. If you have greater wealth, you'll have less crime, which is exactly what was happening under President Trump. Republicans absolutely, especially the Republican Donald Trump, recognizes, that's why he said, what do you have to lose to black Americans in Detroit? I mean, they were living in a very impoverished neighborhood with high crime. And so, yes, high crime and poverty absolutely go together, Miss Cortez. But you know what else goes with that? Democratic rule. That's where it is. But she grew up wealthy by pretty much any standard. Her father was an architect. She was born in the Bronx, but she lived most of her life in one of the richest counties in America. And she was so oppressed and knew so much about the poor. Perhaps she learned about the poor rubbing shoulders with her classmates at Boston University, where she went, man. The tuition there, by the way, averages $55,892 a year. Hardly a place where poor people go. So maybe she rubbed shoulders with some poor folks, either in where she was raised, doubtful, or she thinks she was in school with a lot of poor people paying $55K plus for their education. I doubt it. But she said, do we think this has to do with the fact that there's a record unemployment in the United States right now? The fact that people are at a level of economic depression that we have not seen since the Great Recession, which is exactly why we're trying to get people back to work. And who's fighting people going back to work? Democrats everywhere, pretty much everywhere. If you look right here in Florida, boy, the news on Florida is just hammering Ron DeSantis right now, one of the greatest governors in the country, if not the best in the country. And they're comparing, Cuomo has really turned it around in coronavirus. Look at the death rate, because ultimately the death rate is what matters, right? If you die from something, if you get it and you get over it, no slight to that. I'm not belittling that in any way. But it is the death rate. And Florida's death rate is actually much better than pretty much the entire world, including the great state of New York. But this Great Recession, it's interesting that she would worry about jobs when she was a job killer. You remember Amazon? Now, I'm not a big fan of Amazon. As I told you, it's kind of interesting that Amazon has been booming. At the same time, mom and pops and even other big stores have been being looted and burned. And of course, Jeffrey Bezos through Amazon is a great, not only defender, but a big contributor to Black Lives Matter, who's doing a lot of the looting. So is there a connection? I'm just saying. But that aside, Amazon wanted to bring 25,000, I think it was, jobs to basically Ocasio-Cortez's district, certainly to New York City. And she was the one that spoke out against it and essentially killed the project because Amazon said if they didn't have a good partner in government, then they weren't going to do it in New York. They were going to build a headquarters there and pay people substantial amount of money. But of course, Ocasio-Cortez, she killed that. So if you're looking for a job in her district, just go knock on her door because she killed your job, not Donald Trump. But she said maybe this has to do with the fact that people aren't paying their rent and are scared to pay their rent. And so they go out and they need to feed their child. You know, if your child is hungry, there's not much I wouldn't do to feed one of my kids or my grandkids. That's true. And they don't have money, Ocasio continued, said, adding, they're put in a position where they feel like they either need to shoplift some bread or go hungry that night. Now, of course, there's no food banks and no soup kitchens in New York City. We know that is baloney. But, I guess that's why that people were going out just trying to get some bread. That's probably why Facebook kind of shaded over one of my shows last week when all I did was show, I guess, a person out trying to get some bread where he shot this. It was black on black crime in the Bronx, by the way, where she is supposedly from, where the dude literally reached out of the car window and shot a man in the back that was holding the hand of his 7 or 8 year old daughter and killed him in broad daylight. Maybe he thought, and maybe instead of holding that child's hand, maybe he thought he had a bag full of bread. I'm just saying, maybe that explains why Facebook shaded over my video showing real footage that was shown on the news, by the way. The latest jobless claims figures from the Labor Department pushed the number of job losses since the shutdown began to nearly 50 million, or roughly 31% of the nation's workforce. But shootings aren't happening in just any old place. They seem to be happening mostly in Democratic-led places like Chicago, like New York, D.C., Philadelphia, places like that, Atlanta. It's, is there a connection there? I think there is, but, maybe not. The New York Police Department has reported a staggering increase in shootings and violent crimes in recent weeks, up 300 and some percent. And do you think it's a coincidence that they're hitting record number of police officers that are retiring, choosing to retire from the police department? They've actually put a stop to it in New York City, trying to keep police officers from retiring. And that's up 400 and some percent on retirements. I wonder why. On Saturday, the New York Post reported 15 shootings in 15 hours, not 15 days, 15 shootings. So one shooting per hour, just a week after the city saw a bloody July 4th with 44 shootings and at least 8 killed. Now, I want to play this video for you. And it's a black family. It's a father and his mother, a grandmother of a 1-year-old child. A 1-year-old black child was shot in a stroller on the sidewalk in New York City over the weekend, and you barely heard a word about it. But it's black on black crime once again, but these two a black father and his mother, the grandmother of this child, let's hear a little snippet of what they had to say about who they blame, and I don't think it has anything to do with bread. Let's check it out.
She said, you have to call your baby mother. Junior's in the hospital. So when I called her, she just, as soon as she picked up, she was just crying immediately. You need to get here, you need to get here, hurry. And I'm like, what's wrong? And she was like, Junior got shot in his stomach. And it's okay. And it just broke me down because I didn't know, if my son was going to make it or not, and he didn't. And I'm sitting here calling everybody, nobody can tell me the condition of my son. He getting transferred from hospitals. Nobody's seen him yet. The doctors can't say nothing. It's just, I was looking for answers. That wasn't answered for me, and it just broke me down. And then when the doctors came out and told me, it just, I just lost myself.
For the cowards that did this, you should be ashamed of yourself, because everybody talk about Black Lives Matter. What about baby lives? What about teenager lives? Like, you took an innocent child from a mother and a father, as well as the grandparents. And I don't think it's fair.
DeVille, do you believe, based on what you know now, and no one's talking, that people thought that your son's life mattered by the way they're conducting themselves right now?
No. Anybody who said that they're just lying, because if you know information, that needs to be said, and no information needs to be said. Like, this is my son.
There he is.
Died.
That's good enough. Man, tragic. And de Blasio responded to that shooting, saying that the problem was there's just too many guns, illegal guns in New York City. That's the problem. And that is a problem. There is no question about that there are a lot of illegal guns in New York City. The problem, Mr. de Blasio, is you disbanded the very part of the police department that was taking illegal guns off the street. You disbanded them, sir. And since that time, the amount of shootings has increased dramatically. Ocasio-Cortez goes back and says in some of this, and I'm not going to play it, I don't think, on video, but she talks about how, the crime statistics don't show that there was an increase in shoplifting and stuff like that. No, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about an increase in gun violence, and it has very little, if anything, to do with the lack of bread, maybe the lack of morals. But let's show the picture of the young boy one more time, because, man, is it tragic. Look at that. Now, that's the crime scene. There's the stroller you can see in the background he was sitting in. So he was sitting in an area. They were, I think, waiting on a party or something like that, and there was a drive-by shooting, and he was shot in the stomach. That little precious life is killed. I love what the grandmother said in that video. Baby lives matter. Not to the people that, like de Blasio, not to the people of Ocasio-Cortez that support Black Lives Matter, a communist organization that doesn't have any good for Black Americans. The concept of Black Lives Matter, I'm with you 100%. I do believe Black Lives Matter. I wish they mattered more to some people in places like Chicago. I wish that little boy right there, who, to kind of put a phrase of Barack Obama, that little boy looks a lot like one of my grandchildren. I got a grandson that's about the same age right now. I can't even imagine. I was dreaming about him going fishing with me this weekend. I can't imagine losing him to something senseless like this, losing him, period, but to something senseless like this, man. I'd be just like that father. I'd be ready. I'd not only be crying and brokenhearted, but I don't even want to say what I might be willing to do. Anyway, I'll move on, but it troubles me a great deal. And I think that grandma summed it up really well when she asked the question about baby lives matter, because they're being killed in cities all across America, and people like de Blasio, and yes, I will say it flat out, the Black Lives Matter actual movement, the leaders of that group have blood on their hands all over this great United States of America. And I'm just going to say it. New York City recently cut the New York Police Department budget by $1 billion, but Ocasio-Cortez, she said that's not enough. And she also criticized it as that they really just shifted money around. She probably has a point there. But Ocasio-Cortez has criticized the cuts for not reaching far enough. So they took $1 billion out of the upcoming police department's budget, but that's not enough. She said, when people ask me, and listen, you got to listen to this. She says, when people ask me, what does a world where we defund the police look like? I tell them it looks like the suburbs. Really? Really? You're going to go there? You're going to say that defunding the police department in the inner city of New York is going to look like the suburbs? I mean, give me a break. It is an interesting analogy, though. I don't dismiss her out of hand, because I think that she brings an interesting perspective to this. And the reason I say that is because of the motto, if you want to take it, they want to bring this nonsense to your neighborhood. They absolutely do. They're bringing it to neighborhoods, to the suburbs. You remember what happened to the suburbs in St. Louis when they brought this crap out there? And the McCloskeys, who we got a picture of right here, to me, they're heroes, simply defending their home. What has happened to the McCloskeys? They recently got invaded. Keep in mind that when the McCloskeys were doing this, they first called the police. Yes, they called the police. There's a 911 call where they call for the police. Guess what happened? The police never came. Now, the police eventually did come to the McCloskey residence about 2 weeks later to take their guns. The very thing that was defending them, that perhaps saved their lives, the police, and I'm sure they didn't want to do it, they were driven there, so to speak, by the orders of the district attorney or the attorney general of that area, that absolutely was funded, by the way. I found this out, by George Soros. She took tons of money and was elected primarily by George Soros dollars, those billionaires. You know how Ocasio-Cortez talks about how Republicans don't know anything about poverty? Well, what do Democrats know about poverty when they get all their money from billionaires? The one thing Democrats know about poverty is they need more of it, because by their own admission, they're the party of the poor. So if that's true, if true, like the Democrats always say, then what do you need if you're the party of the poor? More poor. And so the fact that, and that's probably why Ocasio-Cortez was opposed to Amazon, wants to keep her district as poor as possible. But bottom line with all this, and this is why I say Ocasio-Cortez is about defunding the police, looks like the suburbs, is because what she wants is for the suburbs to look like inner city New York Bronx neighborhood. Because keep in mind, I've been saying this for a while, but if I say it, it certainly bears repeating. The new mantra for the Democratic Party is America sucks. That's it. America sucks. It's always sucked. It sucks some for some more than others. And if you vote for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, they'll guarantee you that it sucks for everybody equally. That is the promise of Ocasio-Cortez and the Democratic Party. All right, we're going to move along here to a story from The Hill, and this is Senator Josh Hawley. If you have not heard of him, you need to put him on your radar screen. He's a Republican from Missouri, and I think he's the one that took Claire McCaskill out. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I believe I'm right about that. But he is a rising star in the Republican Party, no doubt about it. And when they start talking about 2024, now we need to get through 2020, but you always speculate a little bit who's going to be someone that's going to replace Donald Trump, hopefully after he wins a second term. You know, we got a campaign like he's 2 votes behind, and the next 2 people you see going to put him over the top. But one of the people I think is a potential contender for the Trump legacy is that gentleman right there, Josh Hawley. And I say that with no equivocation. He is a rising star. You need to check him out. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you this article, because he is not afraid. While many others are afraid to take on Black Lives Matter, are afraid to stand up, Republicans seem to be cowering in the corner in general. Maybe they're starting to feel a little bit because they defended the McCloskeys here recently and all that. So I'm hopeful that they'll grow a pair and lift themselves up by them or something like that. I don't know about their bootstraps, but something else. But Hawley has been an exception to that. He has been speaking out all along. This is from The Hill. It says, Hawley fires back at ESPN, NBA over China. Senator Josh Hawley, Republican of Missouri, in an interview on Monday called ESPN's suspension of reporter Adrian Wojnarowski, and I don't even know who that is. I used to watch ESPN for a while. But he got suspended for basically dropping the F-bomb on Hawley. But Adrian Wojnarowski, a distraction from NBA's relationship with China. This is what Hawley is saying about the suspension of him. Well, he's called for his reinstatement, by the way, with China, and said he would support a Senate subpoena of NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Now, Senator Hawley has been calling out the NBA for a while now, going all the way back to the Hong Kong protesters when that executive for the Houston Rockets came out and basically said something sympathetic to the protesters in Hong Kong about free speech. And then, of course, King LeBron James, the arbiter of free speech, came in and said, free speech can be dangerous when some people get hurt. The only people hurt by it were the Chi-Coms and the pocketbooks of some of the NBA players who I say this, I think most of them are ignorant about what is actually happening in China because they probably live the most pampered existence you can imagine over there. But now, with people like Hawley and people like John Martin Talks, by the way, have brought out the truth about what's happening in China. Now there's no excuse for these woke NBA players not to realize what Mr. Hawley is saying here is absolutely true. In an interview with conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt, Hawley said Wojciechowski, I'm sure I'll mess that name up, who was suspended by ESPN after he responded to an email from Hawley's press office with an expletive. He dropped the F-bomb on him. That's what he did. And he was fired by it. Basically, he called Hawley out for saying that the NBA should answer for the crimes that are happening in communist China. Basically, what Hawley's point is he's saying if you're going to talk about woke culture, if you're going to talk about human rights abuses and police brutality and everything else, and you're going to put that stuff on your jersey with the upcoming kind of shortened season of the NBA that's supposed to happen at the end of this month, if you're going to do all that, why don't you put something on your jersey that talks about the Uyghur Muslims who are in real concentration camps in China, whose organs are being harvested, that type of thing, who are being put in, slave camps, who are being taught how, bred certain way. I mean, they're treated like slavery. They are slaves, if you want to put it that way, in the worst possible way, because they're in actual death camps. Those kind of things are happening in China right now. Yet the NBA just turns a blind eye. Not only did they turn a blind eye to it, but they turned around and punished one of their people for actually standing with protesters. He didn't even mention the Uyghur Muslims. He was talking about people in Hong Kong standing up, asking for the United States' help in freedom. That is what they did, and not even to mention what is actually happening in China, where they're persecuting Christians and everything else. The real concern, Hawley said, was that the NBA, which is allowing pre-approved messages for players, like I was just saying, to wear on the back of their jerseys in response to player involvement in Black Lives Matter protests. Any players actually been down there protesting with them? I doubt it. Did not include any phrases regarding China or supporting law enforcement. Oh my God, did he mention supporting law enforcement like Blue Lives Matter? I mean, Mr. Hawley, now you've gone and done it. It's one thing to talk about China, but to say that police officers in the United States of America, 2 of which were assassinated in Texas a couple of days ago, our hearts and prayers and thoughts go out to the family of those officers who by their names sound like they were Hispanic to me, not typical white police officers that are targeting Black Americans, which is really a hoax in and of itself as well. But he's saying that that the NBA players should talk about law enforcement. I guarantee you every one of those upper echelon NBA guys have security people around them at all time. But, calling out China, sir, Mr. Hawley, I got to give you a little warning here. When you call out China, you risk King James coming down on you with all of his intelligence. King James, LeBron James, who literally apologized for Maori. I think that's the name of the general manager in Houston that spoke out in favor of the protesters in Hong Kong. And LeBron says, well, maybe he was misinformed. This guy's an MIT graduate, by the way, not LeBron, the Maori guy from Houston. And LeBron said that maybe he was just ignorant of the free speech. Right. So you, LeBron, are an intelligent on free speech, and an MIT grad don't know a thing about what he's talking about. Wow, man, that's part of Progresso world right there. When you're going to elevate, you ever see that movie Idiocracy? I've talked about it before. Check it out, but you'll see. So LeBron would make a great president of the United States based on that movie for sure. Check it out. If the NBA is going to put these social justices, this is what Hawley said. He went on to say, if the NBA is going to put these social justice statements on the back of uniforms, which is what they're doing now, why is it there's nothing on there about free Hong Kong or the Uyghurs that I was talking about, or anything that has to do with billions of dollars NBA makes in China? Good question. He brought this out, and this is why that reporter from ESPN which the NBA is a big cash cow for them. So they're actually in cahoots, which guess what? Means that ABC is in cahoots and Disney World as well, which controls Hollywood. If you don't think all this is linked together, you need to get truly woke. I hadn't talked about this in a while, but the Disney now, which is about to reopen, and I'm a fan of Disney, at least I used to be, they control Hollywood now. They make about 70% of the movies go through one Disney corporation or another, especially the big blockbusters, and they cater to communist China. There's a reason why Aquaman, for instance, opened up in China before it opened up in the United States of America. That's happening more and more. There's a connection. Think about it. The Mickey Mouse, and I know it's, I've seen South Park. You got to watch out for old Mickey. He ain't what he appears to be. Connected to Disney. Disney owns ABC. ABC owns ESPN. And ESPN and the NBA are joined at the hip. And it's all about the money. That's what it's about. And Hawley called him out. He said, and you see the response from the reporter talking about this Wojnarowski guy, whatever his name is, and said, now ESPN, and say, well, the reporter will take care of that. We'll silence him. So what he's saying is he's not condoning what the reporter did, but he's saying that suspending him for sending an explicative, a curse word in an email to Senator Hawley is just a distraction. It's kind of like, you think about it, they do this, in Progresso world, they do this all the time. Remember what de Blasio said about painting Black Lives Matter? We brought this to you the other day. You can watch our podcast, by the way. Go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. Of course, now you can also catch us on America's Voice News, not only on Facebook, like we're live. Good morning, howdy, how are you? But they archive our show along their network. You can download a free app, Android, Apple. You can do Roku, Apple TV, Fire Stick, all of that kind of Amazon, everything else. And you can see America's Voice News on that, as well as Channel 219 Dish Network and Pluto. I say all that to say this. We're out there and we're growing every day. We need your support. I should have mentioned this sooner, but we are live from BDU, Big Daddy Unlimited Studios. If you want to support our show directly and help yourself at the same time, look, no matter what you're watching, go to the Facebook page, look at the description of the show. There is a link to BDU there, or check it out. I won't get into too much detail, but it's all things tactical, Second Amendment, guns, supplies, everything else. Check it out, and you'll see how you can share the or help the show here. But Hawley is basically calling out the NBA, saying that ESPN, and this is the point I was going to make. Remember, and Billy Bob tells me to get back on track. He's my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass. He has a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But Billy Bob reminded me that de Blasio in Progresso world said when asked about painting the Black Lives Matter mural in front of Trump Tower, he said that by painting BLM on the road, Black Lives Matter, that they're righting a wrong. And I'm never going to forget that, because to me, he's basically saying, and I would ask that father, like we showed the video, and the grandmother, that their young little boy was killed, a 1-year-old shot in the chest in Ocasio-Cortez's district, I do believe. Does it matter to him? Are they righting that wrong, Black Lives Matter? I mean, what wrong? Are you buying this? Let me just ask Black America. Are you buying this, that painting Black Lives Matter on the street in front of Trump Tower is righting a wrong of slavery? Tell me what it solves, period. It's all for show. It's all part of Progresso world, and it is nothing good for any Americans, especially Black Americans. But he went on to say, but they don't want, talking about, this is Hawley, back to Hawley, Senator Hawley said, talking about the NBA and ESPN, he said they don't want to address the core issue, which is the NBA's relationship with China. ESPN has a slice of that pie. So what he's basically saying is it's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about the money. Show me the money. It's not about the dead presidents. It's about the Benjamin Franklins, the piles and piles of money. money, money, money. That's all this is about. Has nothing to do with any lives matter. Has nothing to do with free speech. It has to do, that certainly has nothing to do with freedom. It's all about the green, baby. But Hawley went on to say, this is a big time money for the NBA, and I think we who deserve to know exactly what they're making. He's talking about subpoenaing in front of the Senate committee to testify Adam Silver, of the commissioner of the NBA. He said, and we deserve to have them explain to us why they won't stand up to this authoritarian regime. He's basically calling out the NBA and ESPN. If you're going to get woke, why don't you get truly woke and talk about people who are enslaved right now in communist China? And so kudos to Senator Hawley. I think his future is bright. We need to support strongly people like Senator Hawley, and thank God there are at least a couple of Republicans. What we really need to do, ladies and gentlemen, and why I keep bringing you these stories, we have got to wake up from our long slumber. Yes, I've come to believe that we've been in a long slumber really since World War II, where we've kind of rested on our laurels. That's not to take away soldiers fighting and all that, but since World War II, our country took a big sigh of relief. You know, we prospered like beyond our wildest imaginations, and I think we went into a peaceful slumber, and we went into a hammock, so to speak, and it's time to wake up, because the blood of patriots are always going to be called upon to feed the tree of liberty. And so I've been telling you, I can hear it right now. Benjamin Franklin, I talk about all of our different founding fathers because I hear their voices just like I hear my dad's voice all the time. He's the one that told me you got to run like you're 2 votes behind, and the next 2 people you see put you over the top. It's what we got to campaign for President Trump. But Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. He wasn't just talking about he wanted to be free or die. He wanted to live free. He wanted to be a rugged individualist. Go read his entire context of his quote there. He was talking about being alive, existing is not enough. Right now, we're so worried about simply existing. Patrick Henry showed us the way that simply breathing air is not enough, not for the people that founded this country. Benjamin Franklin, all about the Benjamins. The woman asked him, what'd you give us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. And he didn't just mean back then, a few hundred years ago. He's talking about now, because it's always about now. Ronald Reagan said basically that the freedoms that we love can't be passed down in the bloodstream. They have to be taught to the next generation. That's what we're missing. We are in a long slumber. And I'm telling you, America, it is time to wake up. Wake up, because their progresso world is upon us, and they are going to implement it in a violent way if they can. They want to bring the violence that's happening in Ocasio-Cortez. They're just looking for bread. They're trying to bring it to your neighborhood. If you don't believe it, ask the McCloskeys in St. Louis. They'll tell you. But we got to rise from our slumber. All right, we got a few minutes left. I want to get into this last story, and it's kind of an update on this Black Lives Matter mural. You knew it was going to be controversial. You know that's why the pettiness of de Blasio painted it in front of Donald Trump's tower there, because they wanted controversy. They wanted it to be a hot spot. It was intentionally done for that reason. But they're getting their wish. This is from USA Today. Black Lives Matter street mural in front of Trump Tower vandalized with red paint, quickly repainted. It says USA Today logo Black Lives Matter street mural, which we talked about earlier this week, in front, I think it was actually Friday, in front of Trump Tower, vandalized with red paint, quickly was repainted. Well, I have no doubt they did. They don't clean off the rest of the graffiti, but Black Lives Matter, boy, you paint over that, you got some problem there. And I want to play this video. It's not directly related to this story. In a way, it is. This was about a month ago after the initial mostly peaceful protest in D.C. There were 3 women. They happened to be white. I don't think color mattered to them. And they were cleaning up some of the buildings downtown voluntarily, just on their own. And they were chastised for doing that. It shows that if you're trying to clean up Black Lives Matter graffiti, you're a hoodlum. But if you're actually putting graffiti on Black Lives Matter, then you're a criminal. So check this out. Check out this video.
Why are you guys removing Black Lives Matter's graffiti?
We're just trying to take care of it. Yeah, we tried over there and it wasn't coming off. It's still not was coming off.
But why do you want that to come off?
Well, because this is a federal building. Yeah, it's just a vandalism.
But so you don't care about Black lives then?
Not at all. That's not at all what we're saying.
That's what this...
We certainly do care about Black lives.
Not enough to leave up a message.
We don't disagree with the message, ma'am. It's just on the building. We're just trying to clean it.
Right. Not a great way to use your white privilege, ladies. Not a great... That's disgusting.
White privilege. So these women on their own time are trying to clean up their neighborhood, and that is white privilege. No, it's not. It is not privilege. It is responsibility. If you're going to be, and I know this is not unique to white people. Let me make that clear. Black people, people in general want to live, I think, in a clean neighborhood. At least sane people do. And I can tell you that poverty, for instance, I meant to say this earlier, has zero to do with cleanliness, tidiness, with self-esteem and everything else. Because I grew up in an area, and yes, a lot of them were black, who lived dirt poor. I remember when I was a kid, there was this one woman I knew. She lived to be over 100 years old, a black woman. She still had an outhouse. She still raked her yard, which you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the leaves. They didn't mow it because people didn't have lawnmowers, so they literally had dirt yards. And that was a sign of pride to keep. If you had tall grass growing, that's. Anyway, she lived dirt poor. She was a friend of mine's mom, and I saw him out there scrubbing with a clothes on a washboard. He said she won't use a washing machine. You can have a lot of pride and be poor in dignity and pride, unlike what Ocasio-Cortez. They have nothing to do with each other. It's the core human being, because you put somebody who has no pride and no dignity, you see this with people winning the lottery. They trash their lives and mansions all the time. Look at Johnny Depp and what he's done with $650 million. I rest my case on that. But police in New York City are investigating after a masked person dumped the red paint on a Black Lives Matter street mural painted in front of Trump Tower. Think about this. That is vandalizing the street, painting that on a street. And we saw this out in California as well. To me, that's vandalizing the street. I don't care if the city sanctioned it or not. What if they had sanctioned something else? Does that mean the city could paint KKK in the street? Just because the city sanctioned it doesn't make it right. They often sanction stuff that's not right. To me, that is vandalizing that street. And they did it intentionally in this case to provoke controversy. That's why they put it in front of Trump Towers. De Blasio is liking the fact that this thing was, quote, vandalized. So I ask, can you vandalize what is already been? But this guy, this Twitter user, Oscar Vela, posted a video of a person who walked up to the V in Black Lives Matter, took out a can of paint, blood red, because they got blood on their hands, and threw the paint at a mural located on Fifth Avenue. The person then left the paint can and ran off. So this is a crime, doing this, but putting a brick through a window, like many Black Lives Matter leaders did, that is not so much a crime. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. Remember this, ladies and gentlemen, we have a choice. It's a little over 100 days away, a little more than that, to the next election for President of the United States. We need to wake up. And I'm going to keep this theme going for the next few months. We have been in a slumber. It is time for us to wake up, man the political ramparts, as I say. If you're new to the show, you might not have heard this, but I say all the time, man the political ramparts so that we don't have to man the real ones again, because that price has been paid. I'm not saying it won't have to be paid again. I fear that it will be if we don't do the right thing come November. Because believe me, it is progresso world that is coming to us. It's not, Joe Biden doesn't have an agenda. His agenda is now Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the hardcore left has totally taken over the Democratic Party. They've put a tabula rasa, if you will, in Joe Biden up there, a blank page, and they are going to be the leaders. If you want to know who is actually going to be the leader if Joe Biden is winning, it's communist, it's Marxist, Black Lives Matter, Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez. They want to bring their America Sucks agenda to you. They want it to be just like Ocasio-Cortez said. You want to see what defund the police looks like? It looks like suburbia. Take them at their word, because it's just the opposite. They want to punish you in suburbia, I can tell you. Like I say, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, share it with others. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. We need to come together and pray for this great nation. But faith without works is dead, and that's why we need to get up off of our butts, off our back, off our couches, and get to work. But as I say each and every day, the main thing every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.